Hello, everyone. This is CSS intern Amy, a nutrition and dietetic student. Today, let's look at bees first, then where do we get honey from? Enjoy the journey.
Bees first appeared on Earth 130 million years ago, and they outlived dinos. What helped them survive for so long is an incredibly complex structure of their society and teamwork. Each bee has its own role and responsibility. Some of them build and repair their home, some bees protect it, others clean the hive and get food. But what if you could sneak into a hive and figure out how this whole system works? What would you see inside? For some mysterious reason, it's easy for you to get past the guards. But if you were a bee from another colony, they wouldn't let you in without a fight. The guard bees look rather intimidating. They stand on their back four legs at the hive's entrance, their front legs raised in the air. These bees inspect every insect entering the hive with their antennae and front legs. Each hive has its own odor, and the guards can understand if a bee belongs to their colony by smelling it. Only the bees that live in the hive can get inside. Suddenly, you see something strange. One of the guard bees has detected an intruder. An alien bee must have mistakenly tried to enter the wrong hive. But it's carrying a load of nectar, and the guard lets it in. Apparently, they don't mind accepting free gifts of food, even from strangers. You feel too curious to linger there any longer. The hive has only one entrance. You notice that the walls around it look strange. You take a closer look and understand that it's coated with a thin layer of some substance. It's propolis, hardened plant resin produced by bees. It helps fight infections and cures different health problems. A bit further, you can see countless honeycombs. They're densely packed hexagonal cells made of beeswax. Bees use them to store food, pollen, and honey. That's where they keep eggs, larvae, and pupae. Honeycombs are fixed to the walls of the hive. They stretch from top to bottom and are even attached to the sides. But you spot narrow passageways along the comb edges. Bees use them to move around the hive. You might also be able to squeeze through one of these tunnels. After exploring the place, you figure out that bees store honey in the upper part of the comb. Beneath, there are cells that contain pollen. Then, there are cells used for keeping eggs with future worker bees. And at the very bottom, there are drone eggs. Of course, your ultimate goal is to see the queen bee, but it's not that easy to find her. First, you come across lots of other bees. Most of them are workers. They make up the largest part of the hive's population, and they're all ladies. Each of them has its own task. The most common of them is foraging. You spot a bee leaving a hive and decide to follow it. The queen can wait a bit. You want to see how bees provide food for the hive. The bee is buzzing ahead of you. After visiting a couple of flowers, it suddenly starts wiggling while hovering in one place. That's the famous bee dance. That's how bees communicate. Once a forager finds a perfect supply of nectar, it starts to perform a very precise dance. It consists of a series of straight lines and figure eights. Throughout the dance, the bee is also shaking its wings. How long the dance lasts means how far away from the hive the nectar is. Every 75 milliseconds is another 330 feet to the distance, and how intense the dance is depends on the richness of the source of the nectar. The stronger the waggle is, the more nectar the bee has found. And there's also the angle of the dance. It shows the direction of the nectar in relation to the sun. Your bee must have found tons of nectar. It's practically vibrating. Suddenly, it starts flying back to the hive. You follow it. There, the bee does a shake dance in front of the other worker bees. This is how it tells other bees they need to go foraging right away. You decide to stay behind and just watch what will happen. Soon, the bees return. They've brought back a lot of nectar that needs to be ripened into honey. Your bee does a tremble dance this time. It's shaking its legs in a way that makes its body tremble all over. This little dance makes other workers get down to process the nectar. It's time for you to resume your search. You dive back into the hive and begin to squeeze through small passageways. You come across the cells where worker bees begin their lives as eggs. It takes a bee 21 days to develop from an egg into a full-grown worker. The first task of this new worker is to clean the cell where it grew. The cell then becomes a nursery for a new egg, and the bee looks after this egg. Later, it feeds the larva and keeps it warm. During the next stage of its life, when it's 12 to 20 days old, the bee starts doing chores around the hive. It produces wax, stores pollen and nectar, builds the comb, guards the entrance, and so on. When the bee turns 20 days old, it becomes a forager. It looks for and delivers pollen, nectar, and tree resin to make propolis. The bee also brings water. Bees need it for drinking and cooling the hive. You keep going until you finally notice a nursery. There, you spot a bee that is twice the size of a worker bee. Your quest has come to an end. That's the queen. This bee is the most important one for the hive because it's the only bee that can lay eggs. Despite her title, the queen doesn't actually rule, and her brain is smaller than that of a worker bee. But she produces special pheromones that influence the mood of the entire hive. The queen also gives birth to every single bee in the colony. When the queen is still a larva, worker bees feed her royal jelly. That's a goop with super high sugar content. A larger cell, along with such a diet, leads to a bigger body and the future queen's ability to emit the pheromones. When the queen has mated with drones, she returns to the hive. 3 days later, she starts laying eggs and never stops. She works especially hard in the spring, laying 1 egg every 20 seconds. No wonder that later in the year, the colony already has a population of 30,000 to 60,000 bees. But wait, something strange is happening here. A group of worker bees, in fact lots of them, might be half the colony, leave the hive with the queen leading them. It means the colony has become too big. The queen goes outside for the first time since mating, and the whole swarm sets off in search of a new home. Back in the hive, a new queen hatches from an egg 8 days later.
Now let's take a look at a spring hive check for the health and safety of the bees. You do it every spring, and it's going to start with getting the smoker ready. The smoke actually calms and kind of slows down the bees. It's very helpful to keep me safe while I'm working on them. So now the smoker is ready and I'm all suited up. Here's the approach to the bees and then we'll get started. Okay, here is a shot of the top where you can see how the frames fit into the boxes. And now I'm going to take a couple of the frames out to take a look at them and see how the colony is doing. When you're working with bees, it's important to move slowly so as not to upset them. So I'll be doing this in a very slow and deliberate manner. Then I'll hold it up for the camera so you can see where the bees live inside of these boxes on the frames. I also wanted to point out that you can see my full suit and all of the protective gear that you wear while you're checking on your bees or collecting honey. This particular frame that I'm about to show you is full of honey. Okay, so while I'm wrapping up the spring hive check, I want to get you ready for the next portion of our movie today. We still need to answer the question of where does honey come from. So the next video is going to be from a little bit later in the year when it's time for harvesting honey from a colony. Enjoy it.
and welcome back to another episode of Ever Wonder. Today we're going to see how honey is made. Honeybees collect nectar from plants and bring it back to their hive. These are what beehives look like. The nectar the bees collect breaks down into simple sugars and is stored inside the honeycomb. Beekeepers use smoke to keep the bees calm before they remove the honeycomb frame. You have to wear a lot of protective gear so you don't get stung, just in case. Wow, look how many bees there are! The next step is to remove the beeswax. This beeswax cap seals the honey into the frame. Once removed, the frames are placed in an extractor, which spins them very quickly and forces the honey out of the comb. Jessie flips the frames many times to make sure they are empty. After it's been strained, the honey is then bottled for anyone to purchase and enjoy. See you next time!
That was a fascinating look at where honey comes from. Now go tell all your friends. As always, email myself or Janice with questions and have a great day.